Hello, in this short video we are going to concern ourselves with the naming or the nomenclature of binary covalent compounds. Okay, so there's a standard way that you can learn this, but I think which I'll offer you, but I think the best way, to be honest, to learn any kind of nomenclature is to just practice writing lots of names. So first of all, I'll give you the standard way that it'll be presented. So you would take your binary covalent compound, whatever that might be, and then you can split that up into typically, because the periodic table has metals on the left, we typically write the metals. Sorry, this is binary covalent. Never mind. Scrub that. We would write the first element, and then we would write the second element. Makes sense? Because it's covalent, they're going to be nonmetals, so not metals. And then the first element now gets a prefix and its elemental name. And then the second element gets also a prefix, and it gets a root, and it has the suffix IDE. Okay. So let's demonstrate that with an actual example. So we're going to follow that for the actual example here. So let's go with our binary covalent compound, which will be CO2. Okay, binary here just means we have something that's first and something that's second. It doesn't mean there's only two things. Okay, so there's our binary covalent compound. We've got the first element and the second element. The first element is carbon. The second element is oxygen. Okay. So then carbon, now there's actually no prefix, and I'll tell you why in a second. So I should probably add a caveat here. Unless mono. So I'm going to list the prefixes in a second. It's a rule that or it's an agreed upon convention that you don't start a binary covalent compound with the prefix mono. Okay, so mono means one. There's only one carbon, but it's agreed upon that we don't start with mono because there's no need if you think about it. So here there is no prefix, so that's a silly example. But this would be carbon. And then we have two oxygens. So the prefix is di. The prefix is di. The root is ox because it's oxygen. And the suffix IDE for ide. So that whole thing becomes carbon dioxide. Okay, so there actually was no prefix with that example. Let's do an example that has a prefix, and let's spend a few seconds talking about the prefix. So here are the prefixes. let me write them here. Let's write it in blue just because we have blue. Prefixes that we'll have to play with are for the first 10 numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And they are mono, di, tri, tetra, penta, hexa, hepta, octa, nona, which I like to tell my students is grandmother in Italian, and deca. Okay. And there's definitely a caveat: never begin a name with the prefix mono. That's just an arbitrary rule that was agreed upon for some reason. Okay, let's pick a second example in which we actually do have to use our prefixes. Okay, so let's pick a second example. So we're going to follow the motif in black to give a second red example because CO2 didn't use that initial prefix. So let's pick P2O5. Okay, so we are going to, so that's our binary covalent compound. Our first and second elements. Our first element is phosphorus. Our second element is oxygen. Then we have our prefix. There's two phosphorus, so our prefix is di. And then we have the name of the element, phosphorus. And then with oxygen, we have a prefix 5, so we know that that is penta. And then we have the root ox for oxygen. And then we have the suffix IDE. So notice here, this is actually something we should point out. If we wrote this out right now, having followed all the rules like good chemists, we'd have diphosphorus, pentaoxide. Now, in the English language, vowels that are next to each other, it's awkward to wrap your tongue around that. So we can join them together because we've got this awkward vowel. Oops, awkward misspelling. This awkward double vowel. So it's rewritten diphosphorus pentoxide. So it just flows better rather than pentaoxide, pentoxide. Okay, so there's a little pronunciation idiosyncrasies like that. Okay, so that's one type of chemical. So if you see a binary covalent compound, and you'll know it's binary covalent because it will be nonmetals only. So maybe we should annotate that this means non-metals. metals only, then you would follow these rules. And again, this is the way it's presented in most resources. My tip is just to get a list of names and just start looking at them. So I'll give you a few more examples here. Let's see how we do. So I'm looking at a list of elements I have, and I have a sneaky feeling I brought up a list with not that many. Okay, let's just create some. Real ones, obviously, but I pulled the wrong list with me. Okay, what about NO2? So then we would have our first and our second element. We have nitrogen, and then we have oxygen, right? Then we have, for our first element, we have only one of them. That would be the prefix mono, but that rule, remember, says that you don't start a binary covalent name with the prefix mono. So we'll ignore the prefix on this occasion and just write nitrogen. Second one, we have the prefix di, because there's two of them. The root ox, let's pick one without oxygen here. You seem to be getting a lot of oxygens here. And obviously the suffix ide. So we've got nitrogen dioxide. Okay, what about, let's see another example. What about, let's see, P to N, let's see, I want to make sure I'm coming up with a real chemical. Let's see if I can find one that I know is a real chemical. Okay, let's try P2 N4, which I think is a real chemical. There's different things we could do to test if it's a real chemical, but for now it will serve as just to name it. Okay, so if that's a chemical and we've got to name it, just to go through the ropes, we've got phosphorus, we've got nitrogen. Our first element, we've got a prefix di, and then phosphorus. Our second element, we have the prefix tetra. Remember, on the earlier page, we have 4, the prefix 4 is tetra. All right. We have the root nitra, and then we have the suffix, actually it's just nite, isn't it? We have the prefix, oh no, that's right, nitr. And then we have the root ide, sorry, the suffix ide, the root is nitra. And you get used to these with a bit of practice. So we have di, phosphorus, tetra, nitride. Okay, and again, my best advice would be to find just a list of a nomenclature worksheet. There are millions of them online, and just practice them. Okay, and that will wrap up this video.